Welcome to the JCPS MTSS training on the Formative Assessment Toolkit with a focus on the high-yield practice, providing formative evaluation. I am Melissa Loxton, MTSS Engagement Resource Teacher with Zone 3.
I am Sarah Adams, MTSS Engagement Resource Teacher with Elementary Zone 1. Please take a moment to write down or type the case-sensitive bit.ly into your web browser. This will allow you to access the slide deck and all the links for future reference.
Here you will see the 6 components that make up the MTSS department or multi-tiered systems of support. MTSS focuses on overall school improvement by aligning resources and support for both teachers and students. We provide multiple levels of support for learners that address academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs and produce professional development that is aligned with schools and the district as a whole. JCPS has 3 departments within MTSS, as shown on this concept map. MTSS Academics, directed by Donna Lawson, supports schools by ensuring teachers are providing all students with academic supports with a focus on Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions and support. MTSS Behavior Department, directed by Sandra Hensel, supports schools in implementing school-wide behavior systems and frameworks, including positive behavior interventions and support, PBIS, and the Behavior Support Systems Model, which is an alignment of PBIS and restorative practices. Our department is MTSS Engagement, directed by Dr. Naomi Brahim. The goal of the MTSS Engagement Department is to increase student achievement by equipping teachers with high-yield pedagogical practices to maximize student engagement. 6 MTSS toolkits were created to provide resources for Tier 1 instructional practices to increase student engagement and reduce student behaviors. Here are the 6 MTSS toolkits. By clicking the toolkit image, you will access the MTSS department webpage and each toolkit. Formative assessment is an ongoing process focused on learning goals where both students and teachers take stock of student work using formal and informal processes. The key to the formative assessment process is that both teachers and students take action to move students closer to their learning goals by adjusting instruction and learning methods. Our MTSS Formative Assessment Toolkit acknowledges that successful implementation of this high-yield practice is reached when teachers gather evidence to measure students' progress in learning, inform instruction, and respond to it while teaching. Formative evaluation is the process of gathering evidence of student progress to inform your teaching. Today, we will analyze the formative assessment process and how it can be used to inform instruction. You will determine ways you can use formative assessment evidence to adjust instruction. Formative evaluation is a powerful tool in understanding the level of knowledge the student possesses. When both the teacher and the student understand the results and take action on future teaching and learning, then formative evaluation becomes even more powerful. This video shares teachers' perspectives and experiences with providing formative evaluation in their classroom.
I first learned about formative assessment in college in my graduate classes, and there we were just kind of taught the basic level of formative assessment, which is, use the call sticks or use a ticket to leave. But they had never really told us what to do with the information to better instruct our to make our teaching better, to instruct our students towards the targets they're trying to reach. And so I remember feeling frustrated at first because I would gather all this data and have kids all over the place and then have no idea what to do with it after I'd gathered it. But now I feel like I have a much better understanding of how to use the data, not just collect it. I've learned a lot of different strategies to use with formative assessment, especially hands-down strategies, which seem to cause so much engagement in the classroom, which I love. But I'm learning a lot more about now how to gather that data and make instructional decisions. So it's definitely informed my teaching in that way, where I'm thinking much more about flexible groupings and I'm thinking much more creatively about how I can meet the standards with when kids are at different places. I'm much more conscientious about it. I do it much more deliberately now. I think before it was, I was using the call sticks as a management tool or something like that. And now I'm planning it. I'm planning, every few minutes to do a check-in using formative assessment.
The formative assessment process has really helped me know what my students know by being able to have kind of a building block and scaffolding for the students. I can start them at kind of a basic level and slowly progress them through to a more advanced level to hit that target. Because I use all different forms of assessments, like my observations, conferences with the students one-on-one, just small discussions with them, exit slips, thumbs up, all the different types of formative assessment that I do use on a regular basis in the classroom. My ability to give them feedback is so much more in-depth, so much more focused, and really can directly relate to the target. And I can kind of get them to grow quicker, it almost seems, because they're getting this descriptive feedback from me.
Observation is really the foundation of not only differentiated instruction, but also formative assessment. You have to be there with the students. You have to see what they're doing. You have to break down the wall that can exist between a teacher and between a student. And the only way that you can do that is to get kids acclimated that here I am and I am with you and you are with me. And I am observing, and not only am I observing you, but the students are observing each other. So it's a two-way street. Yes, I'm observing them, I'm seeing what they're doing, I'm taking notes on them, but they're also observing one another. They're checking, they're self-assessing through their observation of the progress of their work. And it's a phenomenal, phenomenal technique.
The formative assessment process has really changed my classroom community. The students are much more willing to speak up, to ask questions, and not just yes, no questions or what do we do next? It's much deeper questions. I think that I noticed that they're definitely willing to orally pursue complicated issues, which I think is really impressive for 8 and 9-year-olds to be willing to take that risk and to talk through some of their thinking. Irene and Edwin were having a good conversation, and then I used the sticks.
Like if you have all together and each, then you'll know it's gonna be multiplication because there's 2 words that are times and only 1 word that's addition.
Interesting. So you may have to look for a second keyword. The kids are much more engaged with each other. Instead of just always asking me questions, they're turned to each other and ask each other questions, look for answers from each other, explain mistakes to each other. They seem much less nervous to make a mistake or to ask for some help from one of their peers. So that's been a big change.
Here are a few key points from the video to remember. We need to use formative assessment data to drive our instruction while teaching. Using a variety of formative assessments allows for more in-depth feedback. In order for more natural student discourse to happen, we need to build relationships with students so they trust us and each other. Formative assessment is an ongoing process that includes learning expectations, eliciting evidence, interpreting evidence, and acting on evidence. On the next few slides, we will go through the formative assessment process through both the teacher and the student perspective.
Let's look at the formative assessment process through a teacher's perspective. First step, plan and share learning intentions, which are derived from standards, and think about what proficiency will look like. Next, use teacher-designed formative assessments to elicit evidence. This could be through observations, exit slips, or a quick share out. After gathering evidence, analyze and interpret the evidence to determine proficiency or any misconceptions students may have had. During the formative assessment process, it is imperative to provide specific, actionable, and immediate feedback to students. It is also important to adjust instruction to meet students' learning needs through these formative assessment practices. Continuing to adjust current learning goals and establishing new goals will help close the achievement gap. Now let's look at the formative assessment process through a student's perspective. Planning the learning intentions and communicating what proficiency looks like will help students gain a deep understanding of the learning intentions and success criteria. As the teacher uses formative assessments to elicit evidence, this will allow students to actively participate and have a better understanding of their progress toward the learning goals. This will also help identify and address gaps in student learning. To be more successful, students should participate in self-assessment, peer assessment, and student-to-teacher conferencing to obtain feedback that will allow students to adjust their learning strategies in order to reach their goals. This will promote students to create new learning goals for themselves. Once we have data from our formative assessments, we can adjust instruction during the lesson or apply the information to the next lesson. If you can anticipate and plan for possible misconceptions or learning challenges that may show up on the formative assessments before the lesson, it will allow you to address student needs and adjust instruction in a timely manner. Let's look at some things to consider when planning ahead. Think about what misconceptions students might have or what errors may be common. Also, consider where there might be gaps in student knowledge or understanding. What common problems students might experience when applying their knowledge. Lastly, think about what language or communication challenges students might experience. One way to help you plan ahead is to use a graphic organizer like the one shown. Include your learning intentions and success criteria for the lesson, the formative assessments you will use during the lesson, then plan for the possible misconceptions or learning challenges. Think about it as, if students, I will. Of course, it is not possible to plan for all students' responses to a lesson, but pre-planning possible scenarios will allow you to adjust instruction during the lesson. When thinking about if students, I will, here's a list of possible I wills or ways to adjust your instruction based on the data. You can adjust your instruction before, during, and or after your lesson. Here are a few ways you can adjust your instruction. You can provide students with different examples or models, additional guided practice, or small group instruction. Another way you can adjust your instruction is to have students work in pairs, coaching one another. You can also clarify the learning intentions and success criteria or review prior learning that they may have missed. Take a moment to reflect on how you can use formative assessment evidence to adjust your instruction. In any classroom, the teacher should be aware of certain considerations regarding the environment or learning community that they are helping to create. Knowing the backgrounds or the cultural norms for students within the classroom will lead to more engaging and effective instructional practice. You will want to use multiple approaches and options within your instruction to reach all types of learners, and use meaningful and frequent assessments to inform your instruction. In classrooms where ECE students are present, it is helpful to use the principles of universal design for learning, UDL, when planning instruction to identify barriers that may prevent a student from demonstrating or understanding. Be sure to collect formative assessment data frequently and at varied intervals to inform instruction. Question throughout the lesson to understand the student processing and provide explicit and specific feedback. When considering deeper learning, use a variety of assessment modes, including self-assessment, and include focus on critical thinking and problem solving. Here's a list of references that were used throughout the presentation. We've provided you with a planning tool that can be used in your PLC to assist you in providing formative evaluation in your classroom instruction. Thank you for joining us to learn more about providing formative evaluation. If you would like more information about the MTSS Toolkits and other high-yield practices, please visit our department website.